Guten Morgen, it's Morgan. Hi guys, so today was a little crazy and it actually has to do with the story kind of. So today I went to donate blood for the first time ever. I've donated plasma before, but the most recent time that I donated plasma I passed out. So I thought, okay, donating plasma is not for me anymore, but I thought since, you know, it's blood and not plasma and the needle is smaller, that I would be fine, right? So I kind of just spur of the moment decided to donate blood. My husband was already going to donate for my sister's extra credit assignment. This is him playing video games in the background, by the way. I, was getting my blood drawn and everything, and I immediately started feeling like I could see like everything was getting blurry, and I was freaking out, and I told the lady, I was like, I'm passing out, and they like had people come run over, they like leaned me back, they put a cold pack on my head, and I was like, I'm out. And the next thing, I literally felt like I was taking a nap. Like I was so deep into my dream, it was crazy. And then I woke up and they were all just around me and saying my name, and I'm like, oh, hi. Super embarrassed. So this is my badge of honor. But yeah, so I learned that donating blood is not for me because I just pass out for some reason. So this story has to do with a nurse. So to me, this is the scariest of all true crime stories because it could actually happen. I know all of them can actually happen, and there's like, sometimes there's nothing you can do to prevent it, but this one is so scary because it's like the people you put your trust in and the people that are supposed to be like saving your lives, protecting you, and in this story that does not go how it's supposed to go. So this is definitely one of the scariest true crime stories to me, and it fits in with me having gotten my blood drawn. So this story is about Vicky Don Jackson. She was born in February 13th, 1966. So it's the person we talked about last week, Devin, he was also in February. So these February people are kind of crazy. But she was 36 when this all started happening. So a little bit of her backstory. She moved to Texas from Indiana. And in the town of Texas, it was like, there were like 3,000 people. So very, very small. They moved to Texas because her brother had asthma, and it was just a drier climate for him to help him with breathing. She said when she was a little girl, she said that she wanted to be Florence Nightingale. So that was a famous nurse. She was like a trainer of nurses, and she would help wounded soldiers in the Crimean War in Constantinople. So that's who she aspired to be. So they said even from a younger age, she wanted to be a nurse, and she just really wanted to help people. So her dad was a shade tree mechanic. I don't really know what that means, but I think it just means that he helped cut trees so that they gave shade. I really don't know what that even means. But then her mom was a cook at a nursing home. So when Vicky was a junior in high school, she started working at that same nursing home, just like to do laundry, and she was just a nurse's aide at that same nursing home that her mom worked at. So she got to spend a lot of time with her mom and a lot of time working with patients and doing what she always wanted to do. So when she was a junior in high school, right, she met this guy. So she would play like Mrs. Pac-Man a lot, and I guess she was like not known for it, but everyone was like, oh yeah, there's Vicky playing Mrs. Pac-Man again, kind of thing. So this construction worker, his name is Johnny McLaughlin, and he was 5 years older than her. So she's 17 and he's 22, right? And he sees her and he says like, oh, you're cute. And a couple weeks later, she tells her parents, she's like, I'm in love, it's love. So they get married while she's still in high school. She hasn't graduated yet. Anyways, so they get married, and within a year they get divorced. They get divorced, and then she graduates in 1984. So pretty just like her junior years when they were married, basically. Then she starts dating another guy, Leroy Carson, and she's still a teenager at this point when she's dating Leroy. And he said to her, like, I don't want a serious relationship, like, I don't ever want to get married, so we're just, like, in this for, you know, to be boyfriend and girlfriend, or not even, because he didn't want a serious relationship. And she's like, yeah, I'm okay with that, like, I literally just got out of a marriage, so, like, she wasn't in a super big rush to get married again, or even have a serious relationship. But that same year that she got divorced, 1984, she got pregnant with her first child with Leroy. So Leroy's like, okay, we'll get married then. So they get married in 1985, and right after she had the baby and got married, she got pregnant again. She had a son, and then she had a daughter. So her son's name is Curtis, and her daughter's name is Jennifer. So after she had her daughter, she started going to nursing school to become a nurse, obviously. And the family said that, like, the daughter, the son, Curtis, Jennifer, and Leroy all said that she had a short fuse. She would get angry so quickly at them. She would just come home and yell at them and talk really, like, down on them. It said, like, she was talked rough towards them. She would, like, yell and nag her husband along with the kids, and she would even slap them, the children, and Leroy. So after 12 years of marriage, Leroy can't handle this anymore, and he divorces her in 1996. But she got custody of the kids, even though she is the one that is verbally and physically abusing them, and just doesn't really seem like she wants to have kids, you know, in general. But she got her nursing degree back when they first got married, and her kids say that she would just get tired of her job and quit and then just start somewhere else. So she would just skip around from hospital to hospital, from nursing home to nursing home. And the family said she never spoke about her job, other than that she would get annoyed, get tired of it, and then quit. So Leroy says he never knew why she wanted to be a nurse. She never once said a good thing about it, you know, wasn't nice to them, obviously. So she gets married for a third time to Kirk Jackson 2 months after meeting him. So she goes to this bar and she meets him. He's like 5'3", 230 pounds, and she's like, yes, that's the one for me. So they start dating, 2 months go by, they get married, and immediately she says that he was like cheating on her, and she was always insecure. He was always like going out with other people, and she was just like, why does everybody want my man? And I'm like, no offense, but he doesn't sound like that great of a catch. So since they got custody of the children, he is their stepfather now. I mean, that would happen either way, but he would abuse the children quite frequently. So after a few years, they moved back in with their father. She lost custody of her children in 2000, and she went through a lot of like emotional stress. Her husband was cheating on her new husband. She had a close relative die, and she had a miscarriage with this new husband. So things weren't going great for her, and she, you know, was getting depressed about it and just feeling really woe is me kind of thing. And so she went to see a therapist, and the therapist, according to Vickie, said that she had bipolar disorder. So when her daughter Jennifer comes over to talk to her, she's just staying with her for the weekend, you know. She's like, hey mom, how are you doing? What's going on? And the mom's like, oh, yeah, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And her daughter's like, what is that? What even is that? And she was like, and I quote, "It means I could kill you and get away with it." Jennifer, her daughter, was so scared. She says, like, I don't know if my mom was like saying like it as a joke or whatever, but Jennifer was so scared from then on, she would sleep with a baseball bat because she was scared her mom would kill her and get away with it, you know? So that's just a little bit of, that's where Vickie is at. She has bipolar disorder, and to her, that means she could kill someone and get away with it. Now, that is not what bipolar disorder is. So let's get into the murders. The first known murder, was December 11th, 2000. So at this time, Vickie is 34 years old. She went into Donnie Jennings. She was 100 years old. This patient was known to demand a lot from the nurses. She was very particular and wanted things done a certain way, and if you didn't do things her way, she would spit on you and even hit you. So she was known to the other nurses that she would strike you, is what they said. But what happened was Vickie got a drug called Mivacron, and it's a paralyzing drug. So doctors will use that to like calm down their patients, but then they have to like put a breathing tube in to make sure that the person can breathe, obviously. So Vickie puts this in Donnie's tube and just walks out. And Donnie starts, she can't breathe, she can't talk, so she's just making this faint gasping noise. And she starts foaming at the mouth, her face turns blue, she suffocates to death. She's then found at 1:45 a.m. So that is how all of them are gonna be. They're gonna foam at the mouth, not be able to breathe, and have their face turn blue. The next person was 9 days later. So December 20th, it was an 87-year-old farmer named L.G. Hudson, and he was at the hospital for a broken leg. So 2 hours later, the third victim, Sanford Mitchell, 62 years old, retired supervisor for an electric company, and she did the same thing where she just injected it into their IV and just walked out of the room while they died. So he was in there for cirrhosis, and the nurses frantically tried to save him. So they were able to catch that he was dying, and they ran in there and tried to save him. So that was only 2 hours after she killed LG. The fourth victim was on Christmas Eve. I can't even. This one, it's so sad. Christmas Eve. Can you believe that? It was 50-year-old Barbara Atterbury, and she was in there for back pain. Just back pain. And she died. Same day, 87-year-old Boyd Burnett, and he went to the hospital because he felt disoriented. So I don't know how it took them so long to catch in on this. It's like, oh, all these people are dying from not being able to breathe, yet none of their injuries are even remotely about breathing. Like, not at all. So then, 5 days later, number 6 victim, it was December 29th, 80-year-old James Gore, and he was in there for aspirated food. 7 hours later, 79-year-old Gertie Matthews was in there for dementia and urinary tract infection. They tried to resuscitate Gertie, but they were not successful, and they said that Vickie just stood there and watched her die. Like, all the nurses came running in to try and save Gertie, and they said that she just stood there and watched her die. Like, didn't even try to help her in any way. And they did think that was kind of weird, but they thought, like, oh, she's just in shock from this. Like, I mean, it would be scary for anyone. I mean, especially if you didn't do it on purpose, it should be traumatic, right? But I guess they're a hospital. They should, yeah, for real. She's been a nurse for so long. Like, that's not reason enough. I don't think that's reason enough to be like, oh, that's why she didn't help. So victim number 13, Jimmy Ray Holder. His wife was sitting, like, you know how you can visit your family when they're in the hospital and they have that chair like right next to the bed? Well, his wife was sitting in the chair right next to the bed, and she just goes in there and she's just like, oh, it's just pain medication. And the wife's like, okay. And then the second she walks out of the room, her husband's like, I can't breathe, you know? The nerve. So she was getting pretty confident in her duties because there were 5 more in 8 days in January. So like the first 8 days in January, she killed 5 more. Those aren't listed. Number 14 is 95-year-old Oma Weiler. She was revived. So Vicky goes in there. She drugs her with the paralysis drug. But the nurses are able to save her. And, you know, so they're thinking like, oh, yay, this is a miracle. Oma's pretty happy about it. She's excited that she's not dead. But 4 days later, Vicky goes back in there to finish the job. So this time she does die. It's like, you didn't get that? Like, there's obviously a reason she was saved. Like, don't do it again. The next one is number 15, January 11th. J.T. Nichols, 82 years old. 3 hours later, 78-year-old John Williams, he was there for a sore foot. Number 17, January 30th, 82-year-old Orville Moore. And minutes later, so literally walking from one room to the next, 14-year-old Lydia Weatherred. She was there for appendicitis. So not only does she go and, you know, kill this one guy, but then she goes minutes, like literally walks over to the next room and injects a 14-year-old girl with her mom sitting right there too. She turns to her mom because, again, Vicky said that it was pain medication. So she turns to her mom and she goes, my chest hurts. She starts clawing at her throat and her mom starts screaming. And everyone said it was like a horror movie. The mom starts screaming, and again, the nurses come frantically and they are able to save her. So she doesn't die, but still absolutely horrible. And you've got to realize, like, this 14-year-old, I mean, all of these other deaths are, there's no reason why they should have, you know, stopped breathing randomly, but especially a 14-year-old who's there for appendicitis. It's not like the other ones are in worse age, health, and stuff. So, I mean, they could be like, oh, maybe they just died of natural causes. Victim number 19 was on January 31st, so only a day after Lydia. 46-year-old Donna Kernett, and she was able to press the nurse button, and she said, I can't breathe, I'm having a reaction. So then the next victim, the 20th victim, I think 2 have been revived at this point. Oh, revived and then died, but Lydia, she did live. Same day, 35-year-old Lisa Pelkley, but she was saved. Victim number 21 was on February 4th. He was a preacher. They called him Preacher E.E. Jackson. And if you recognize that last name, he was in there for high fever and cellulitis. And that is her husband's grandfather. So her current husband, Kirk Jackson, that is his grandpa. So she literally killed her in-law. So after this, they're just like, the hospital is like, well, maybe it's just a run of bad luck. A lot of people do die in the winter, but they had like, at one point, they had 15 deaths when they only had 30. They only have 38 beds in the hospital. So that's like half of their patients are dead, mysteriously. The people in charge are like, well, maybe it's just a run of bad luck. Like, they don't want to assume that there's a serial killer. Like, they would never in a million years think that. But the other nurses are like, Well, Vicky is the last person to have seen most of these people before they die, so that's sus. And she doesn't really seem to care at all about reviving them or helping us. They just kind of keeping an eye out, keeping a thinker on it, when they notice that the drug Mivacron is missing. So the drug was replaced 4 times from November 23rd to January 9th, and they never even had to use it. So they're like, we're missing like 20 vials of this drug, and we haven't had it accounted for like needing to use it on anybody. So they contact the authorities and they're like, hey, we want to keep this hush hush because we don't want them to know we're onto them. But the police set up a hidden camera where the drug is stored so that they can see when it is used, when someone takes it. So after the hidden camera was set up, the last victim, kind of, because there's many more that we don't know about, like we can't prove yet, but it was 61-year-old Donnelly Reed, and she was there for a post-polio syndrome. She was very popular in the hospital. She would come for like regular checkups just to like make sure that, keep an eye on her polio, post-polio syndrome. And so she was really well known and well liked by the staff there. And so when she started dying, they were all freaking out and very sad. But she was revived, so they had enough to get a warrant, and they went to her house and found a syringe full of that drug in her garbage. And Kirk, he actually works there as well, but he's not like a nurse. He just works there. And so he doesn't have access to medication. And so the fact that it was in his house, which is also Vicky's, but they were both fired because at that time they couldn't prove that she had killed anyone. So they were exhuming the bodies to check for traces of the drug. So after that, Kirk was really mad because obviously he knew that he didn't do it. So he packs up and he moves after having nightmares of her killing him, stabbing him with a needle. So he would have nightmares of her stabbing him with a needle, like to drug him, how these other people were dying, and he could not take it anymore. So he moved out. So let's get into possible motive. So everybody said that she was sweet, soft-spoken, she was like a wallflower, but she was always so nice, she would always smile, and they said like she would do anything for her patients. She never said an ill word ever about her patients, even though she would have to, her patients would have constipation, diarrhea, whatever, she would take care of all of it, and no one has ever heard her say anything negative about her patients. So nothing really significant happened to get her to start doing this. The speculation is that she just was tired of her life and not having control, and basically just snapped one day, probably when someone was being mean to her, like that lady who was known to strike and spit on nurses for not doing what she wanted them to do. A couple of her victims, L.G. Hudson, the second one, his son was an EMT and he was a church minister, and he would go up to Vicky often and say that all of her problems, all of her personal problems would go away if she would just be born again. And so he would kind of belittle her problems and just constantly try to get her to join his church, I guess, and be born again. And so that's a possible motive for killing his father. Sanford Mitchell, the third victim, would call her nurse tits and would always look at her breasts. So I guess he was just known for being a creep. Great way to go out. And then the 2 people that were killed on Christmas Eve, their family members used to make fun of Vicky in high school. So she wasn't, hurting the people that hurt her, but, well, she wasn't killing the people that hurt her, but she was hurting them by killing their family members. So the 16th victim, John Williams, Vickie had a crush on his son, and so after she killed his father, she went up to him and comforted him and was like, I'm so sorry for your loss, if there's anything I can do for you. She gave him a hug, and it was just like, oh, he finally will notice me kind of thing. So after she gets fired and they're investigating her for murder of all these people, she sees him at the Dairy Queen and is like, oh, hey, how are you? And he's like, if that were a dude, I would have punched them. I would have beaten them to a pulp. And he was like, how dare you? How dare you talk to me like we're friends after you killed my dad? He was livid, as I'm pretty sure all of us would be. I'm like, dude, I don't care if you did it or not, don't come up to me and be like, oh, hey, how are you? After, like, you might have killed my father. Lydia, the 14-year-old, remember? She turned down Vickie's son, Curtis. So Curtis asked her out on a date, and Lydia said no. And the next day, Vickie tried to kill her. It's like Mama Bear on steroids, right? Yeah, maybe don't turn down dates. No, I'm just kidding. This is why girls are scared to turn down dates, because, I mean, usually they're scared of the guy doing something, but in this case, the mom did something. I'm gonna do my eyeliner off camera. So the person who she tried to kill afterward, Lisa, she was known to be one of those popular girls in high school that would make fun of Vickie, and she was at this bar called the Third Spur, and that's where Vickie actually met her third husband. But Lisa would just be like, oh wow, you're here, like that's brave, you know, one of those people. And so I guess that's why Vickie decided to try to kill her, even though she survived. Those are the only like connections that Vickie has to the victims. I mean, they were in a small town, so she knew all of them. A lot of them were parents of her friends. A lot of them were even family members. And she knew every single person that she was killing, and either wanted to or just didn't care about their life. So after she was fired, she went to that same bar, the Third Spur, because Lisa was no longer there, because after she was resuscitated, she decided to move to the Northwest, which, good idea. I mean, if someone tried to kill me, I'd probably move too. So she was like, yeah, let's go here. Like, now we can have fun because Lisa's not here to be prettier than us. She got a new job at a nursing home because they didn't check their references. So she just start over at a new nursing home. But a few weeks later, she was fired for trying to steal medicine. Vickie, learn your lesson. She was arrested 2002 of July. So all of these murders happened from 2000 to 2001 in like December, January, February, with possibility of happening in November or early December as well. And I guess we don't know how many, but those are the ones we know of from December to February. And she was arrested a year later, which makes me a little mad because she did go to a different nursing home and she could have killed those people too. She was working at a grocery store, and when the cops came in to arrest her, the manager of the grocery store says, you have the wrong person. You have the wrong person. There's no way it could be Vickie. And he was like, she was so sweet. She was delightful. And she loved telling funny stories. I'm like, oh yeah, that story about how she tried to kill someone? Hilarious. She goes to jail, awaiting her trial, and she tells her inmate, like, yeah, they think I did this, but I didn't. Like, I'm a good person. I loved my patients. I would never in a million years hurt anyone. Like, I wanted to be a nurse to save people and to help people. So her inmate kind of believed her for a little bit. But then when she's telling her, the inmate is like, oh, those poor families, like they lost their loved ones, when it's not like they were in intensive care. Like, they were there for a sore foot, a back pain. Like, they had no idea their family members were gonna die. They thought it was just a normal checkup. Not checkup, but just a normal trip to the doctors. And so she says, like, the inmate says, how terrible for the families. And Vickie says, screw the families. And the inmate's like, okay, well, an innocent person wouldn't say screw the families, just so you know. So as they're gearing up for trial, the prosecution has 58 witnesses, and one of them is her daughter, Jennifer. When Vickie finds this out, she's like, no. I'm not going to contest the accusations. She basically says, like, I'm not saying I'm guilty, but, like, I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty. So that means that they are not going to have a trial, because she's saying, like, yeah, put me in prison for capital murder, and there doesn't need to be a trial. Because I guess she just didn't want a jury finding her guilty, and she didn't want her daughter to, like, talk trash about her. So she was like, yeah, I'll just solve this problem. I still remain innocent, you know, according to myself and according to records, but I'll still go to prison. Like, that's fine. So that's what happens. And they are moving her from like the county jail to a real prison. And she's like, yeah, there's an infirmary there. And she's like, I'm going to try and be a nurse there. And they're like, no, like, it's literally what got you in here. But she says that she is adamant that she did not do this. She never would, even though she was the last person to see them. And they did catch her on camera with, like, stealing the medication. And they found it in her home. And she got fired from another job for trying to steal medication. And she had all these, like, little vendettas against these people, which, I mean, there is no reason to kill someone, but, like, really? Those are really not reasons. Because you want to hug the boy you had a crush on in high school? Yeah. Let me know how that worked out for you. So the 14-year-old Lydia, she ends up saying that she wants to become a nurse so that this never happens to anyone else ever again. Because it was very traumatic, obviously, for her. And she wants to protect others and do what a nurse is actually supposed to do, is what she said. When she was 18 years old, her daughter Jennifer said, my mom had a baby face on the outside, but heck on the inside. But she didn't say heck, just so you know. A coworker said, I don't know if she did it or not, but she's perfectly capable of it. So this story scares me so much because I do have older-ish parents, and it scares me that, you know, they're gonna go to the doctors and then just die because someone murders them. And it just gets as a, oh, it was natural death, or, oh yeah, they were kind of getting up there. Or even just myself. Like, when I went to get my blood drawn, my husband was telling them about my YouTube channel, and I was like, actually, I was just talking about how I'm never going to the doctors again because of this story. And I'm like, but here I am letting you inject me with something. And they're like, well, we're not putting anything in, just the needle to take your blood out. And I'm like, still, it was scary and stressful when I thought about how this lady had done that. And it's just crazy. Like, minutes later, she would just go from one room, and she was so ballsy about it. She would just, while the wife was still there, while the mom is right there, and say, oh yeah, it's just pain medicine. And then, like, why is she dying then? But that is the awful story of Vickie Jackson. I was trying to think of who I should talk about, and Cody was like, do a woman. You're always telling me about how there's so many guy killers. I'm like, okay, I don't know why this is more reassuring for you, but here's a lady killer. It's just like you put so much trust in medical providers to take care of you, because that's their whole position, is to protect you. And then this stuff happens, and it is so scary. So here's the finished look. This lighting is making me look super tan, and I swear I'm not this tan, especially after passing out today. I am super pale. Stay safe out there. I really don't know what advice to give you, because even with someone being there, it can still happen. So, I don't know. Good luck. Bye.